Hey, have you ever thrown your money at something completely worthless and felt like an absolute idiot? NFTs? Some influencers' cryptos? That guru's online masterclass? I feel you. But not as much as Olympias and Philip, who paid a courtesan to cure Alexander the Great of the fact that he wasn't into women at all. That being said, let's talk about Alexander and the relationship with his bestie, the one that determined the spectacular demise of the greatest empire of the ancient world. Now, there is nothing, and I mean nothing, that pisses off Greeks more than even implying that Alexander the Great was gay. And honestly, he wasn't. I don't want to sound like my grandmother, but back in the day in ancient Macedonia, sexual identity was not nearly as rigid as it became in the modern world. There was no gay or straight. There was just who you loved and who you took to bed. And frankly, nobody thought to combine those two into a personality type until much, much later. Alexander was a man who loved a person more than he loved his empire, more than he loved his legacy, and as it seems, more than he loved his own life. And that person was Hephaestion. But before we get there, who was Alexander the Great? Alexander was the king of Macedonia, a small kingdom in northern Greece. He was born in 356 BC, the son of King Philip II, a brilliant military strategist, and Olympias, a woman who was by all accounts absolutely crazy. But that's for another episode. He became king at 20 after his father was assassinated at a wedding, which as far as family dinners go is a lot. And then he just couldn't stop. In 12 years, he conquered Egypt, Persia, parts of India, everything between Greece and the edge of the known world. He never lost a single battle. Armies that have been fighting for centuries collapsed in front of him. He founded over 20 cities. He named at least one after himself. He named one after his horse, Vukephalas. His horse had a city. What do you have in your name? By the time he was 30, he controlled the largest empire the world had ever seen. By the time he was 32, he was dead after 3 wives, 2 sons he never got to raise, and an empire that fell apart within a year. And through all of it, every battle, every conquest, every crown, there was one constant, one person who was always there. Hephaestion, son of Amintor, born in 356 BC, the same year as Alexander. Alexander and Hephaestion were both sent to study under Aristotle at Mieza, a small town in Macedonia, where Philip had basically built a school for the sons of the Macedonian elite, the best tutor in the world for the best kids in the kingdom. Picture it, 2 13-year-olds sitting in a garden, being lectured about philosophy, politics, and the nature of the universe by the smartest man alive. And somewhere in that garden, something clicked. From that point on, for the next 23 years, Alexander and Hephaestion were inseparable. In every campaign, victory, loss, every tent in every corner of the known world. Curtius, one of our ancient sources, writes that Hephaestion was by far the dearest of all the king's friends. He had been brought up with Alexander and shared all his secrets. Now, Hephaestion was not just the friend. Let's be very clear about that. He was Chiliarch, essentially the second most powerful man in the entire empire. He commanded the companion cavalry. He negotiated with kings. He built bridges, literally, as he was also the chief engineer. The man was extraordinary in his own right, but history mostly remembers him because of who loved him, which is either very sad or very romantic, depending on how you look at it. It's sad, I agree. In 334 BC, Alexander and his army crossed into Asia Minor, the beginning of the Great Campaign, the moment everything became real. And the first thing he did when he arrived was to went to Troy, because Alexander was obsessed with Achilles since his childhood. Aristotle had given him a copy of the Iliad, and Alexander slept with it under his pillow next to a dagger. So he goes to Troy to pay his respects at the tomb of his hero. And here's the thing, at the tomb of Achilles, Alexander places a wreath. He runs around the tomb. He honors the hero. Hephaestion places a wreath at the tomb of Patroclus. That's it. That's all that happened. No speech, no declaration, just two men standing at two tombs, making a choice about which hero they identified with. According to Greek mythology, Achilles and Patroclus were close. How close exactly was debated even in ancient times. Aeschylus said they were lovers. Plato had his own opinions and Xenophon disagreed. But the one thing everyone agreed on was that their bond was the greatest in all of Greek literature. So much so that when Patroclus died, Achilles lost the will to live. A few years into the campaign, Alexander defeated Darius III of Persia at the Battle of Issus. Darius fled so fast, he left behind his entire family, his mother, wife, and daughters. They were captured by Alexander's army. The treatment of captured royal women in the ancient world was not great. Let's leave it at that. But Alexander did something unexpected. He went to them personally to assure that they would be treated with respect, that they were under his protection, that nothing would happen to them. He walked in with Hephaestion. Hephaestion was taller than Alexander, more classically handsome by most accounts. And when the two men entered the tent, Darius' mother, Sysigambis, made a very understandable mistake. She walked past Alexander and knelt before Hephaestion. There was a moment of silence, the kind of silence where everyone in the room stops breathing. And then Alexander said, "Don't worry, mother. You made no mistake. He is also Alexander." Think about that for a second. The most powerful man in the world, in the middle of his greatest conquest, turned to his companion and says, "You are me. We are the same person." Sysigambis apparently understood immediately what that meant. Ancient sources tell us that for the rest of her life, she treated Alexander as a second son. And when he died, Sysigambis refused to eat. She died 5 days later. 324 BC, Alexander's campaigns are winding down. The army is tired, and so is Alexander. They've been on the road for a decade now. They arrive in Ecbatana, modern-day Hamadan in Iran, and for once, it's not a military camp, it's a festival. Games, drinking, celebrations. After 10 years of war, everyone is finally just relaxing. Hephaestion gets sick with a fever. Nothing dramatic at first. Soldiers got fevers all the time. His doctor, Elafias, puts him on a strict diet and tells him to rest. Standard procedure. For 7 days, Hephaestion lies in bed with his fever, and then on the 7th day, he starts to feel better. Elafias, satisfied that the worst is over, leaves to go to the theater. Because there is a festival, and honestly, why not? The patient is recovering. Alexander is at the games. And Hephaestion, feeling better for the first time in a week, does what any soldier who's been starved on a medical diet for 7 days would do. He eats a whole chicken and a large jug of wine, strictly against doctor's orders. Within hours, he collapses. Someone runs to get Alexander. Alexander runs. He doesn't make it in time. By the time he arrives, Hephaestion is already gone. He was 32 years old, the same age as Alexander. What happened next tells you everything you need to know about what Hephaestion meant to him. He didn't speak for 2 days, didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat with the body. He cut his own hair, the ancient symbol of grief so profound it was usually reserved for the loss of a parent or a child. He ordered the manes and tails of every horse in the army to be cut. He had the sacred flame in the temple of Amun extinguished, a gesture reserved in the ancient world exclusively for the death of a great king. He executed the doctor. He wrote to the oracle of Siwa, the same oracle that had once declared him the son of a god, and asked them to grant Hephaestion divine status, to make him immortal, because if he couldn't keep him alive, he would make him a god. Ancient sources tell us Alexander then threw himself into a military campaign against a local tribe with recklessness nobody had seen before. No strategy or caution, just violence. Grief, basically, with an army. The funeral pyre they built for Hephaestion in Babylon was 5 stories high. They spent more on his funeral than most cities spend in a year. And Alexander stood there and watched it burn, the most powerful man in the world, completely alone. Eight months later, Alexander was dead. 32 years old, same age as Hephaestion. The official cause was fever, not unlike the one that took Hephaestion. Some historians say it was typhoid. Others say poisoning. He had plenty of enemies by that point. There were theories, investigations, accusations. But there is a third theory, not scientific or provable, just human, that after Hephaestion died, Alexander stopped being careful, stopped eating properly, started drinking more, took risks he never would have taken before, like a man who had lost the thing that made him want to go home. His empire, the largest the world had ever seen, dissolved within a year. His generals tore it apart. His wives were murdered. His sons never made it into adulthood. Everything he built was gone, except his name, and Hephaestion's name, which we only remember because the greatest conqueror in the history couldn't live without. And I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if Hephaestion hadn't died that day? Would Alexander have lived longer? Would Hephaestion, the second most powerful man in the empire, have held it together after Alexander's death? Would the empire have survived? Would Alexander's son have grown up? Would his name be on a tomb somewhere that we could actually visit today? Most of us will never build an empire. But maybe, if we're lucky enough, we'll be blessed to be loved like that, by someone who stands next to us for as long as we're here and wants to burn the world down once we're gone. How about you? Are you lucky enough?